Our guest is Yuriy Komarnitsky, Deputy Commander of the 1st International Legion of Defense of Ukraine. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to heroes. We are very grateful that you have found the time for our conversation and agreed to this interview. We understand the situation and that you are in circumstances where time is even more important than it is here, where we are. Mr. Yuriy, let's talk about the International Legion. Please tell us, what was the purpose of its creation? What are the rules for creating a unit, or more precisely units, and to whom do they report?
Our Legion was created after President Zelensky's appeal to the international community, in which he called on all foreign volunteers to join the armed forces of Ukraine to repel the attack of a terrorist state, Russia. The International Legion reports directly to the command of the land forces of the armed forces of Ukraine and performs tasks as a special purpose battalion in which foreigners fight.
Як батальйон спеціального призначення, в якому воюють іноземці.
From the very beginning, the Legion looked a little different. During these 4 years of its operation, both its structure and mode of operation have changed, and above all, its national composition and the number of volunteers. How did it look?
Повномасштабна агресія.
The large-scale invasion has been going on for 4 years now. The battalion has improved year after year, adapting to the trends and requirements of modern warfare. War means constant modernization of everything, not only the types of weapons, but also the principles and rules of warfare. If we go back to the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022, we can see that the war in 2025 is completely different. Technology is fighting in it. Although, of course, it cannot do without human participation.
Воюють, але не без участі людей.
What is the nature of your tasks within Ukraine's defense structures? Do you have any specializations? Are these typical military tasks? What distinguishes you from other subunits of the armed forces of Ukraine?
We are, so to speak, a model battalion with one special feature: foreign volunteers. We perform the same most difficult tasks: assault, defense, raids. And we do it successfully, just like the line units of the armed forces of Ukraine. The only thing that sets us apart is the fact that we are made up of foreign volunteers. These are highly motivated people, ready to defend Ukraine, guided by their beliefs in a free society.
We will talk more about recruitment and what you emphasized, that these are volunteers. But first tell us about the challenges facing your unit at this stage in 2025. You mentioned that a large-scale invasion has been going on for a long time. What tasks does your unit currently face, and what are the plans for the future? Will the International Legion expand, or is there a plan to reduce the number of volunteers? What will it look like?
Mr. Powell, I will answer your question as follows. Of course, the number of foreign volunteers will not decrease. We hope that volunteers from all over the civilized world, from the Baltic states, Poland, and other countries, will continue to join us. The procedure for accepting volunteers is as follows. We have an official website where the entire procedure is described in 10 languages. If someone wants to join us, they visit this website, read about us, read a short history, learn how we work, what tasks we perform, what nationalities serve with us, and what the recruitment process looks like. From that moment on, that person has all the basic information and the recruitment process begins.
Since we have touched on the subject of recruitment, I remember the beginning of the large-scale invasion. Many of my friends who had experience serving in NATO armies joined the fight through private contacts, through friends in the Ukrainian army, or in volunteer formations. Currently, as I understand it, it is already a fairly structured system. As you mentioned, what should a recruit be like? What qualities should they have?
If I had to define the basic qualities of a recruit, it would be motivation above all else. Motivation that has nothing to do with money. People don't come to us for money. Volunteers come who are aware of what is happening in Ukraine. When someone receives reliable information, and unfortunately, Russian propaganda and information psychological operations do their job, and not everyone has accurate data, then that person looks for a way to contact us. They find our website and see the section for recruits, how to join. In 10 different languages, we clearly explain what needs to be done to join us. This is how the volunteer's journey begins. A recruit who wants to serve in our legion.
І отак починається першочерговий шлях добровольця-рекрута, який хоче до нас долучитися.
There are people from different regions of the world in your ranks. Initially, they were mainly Europeans, Poles, Slovaks, Czechs, citizens of the Baltic states. There are no mental barriers with them. Currently, the geography is much broader. How do you overcome cultural differences? Do you divide soldiers according to nationality? For example, separately from South America, separately from Europe?
Ні, зразу кажу ні.
No. I say no right away. People from all over the world serve in our unit. Poles, Argentinians, Colombians, US citizens. That's not the point. The point is that after a certain amount of time fighting together, even after a month, the volunteers begin to understand each other perfectly. Civilians don't understand this. A real brotherhood develops between them. In reality, it doesn't matter what culture, nationality, or religion a person is upon joining the Legion. They become part of it. We become one big family, united by a common goal, to stop the Russian aggressor. Cultural differences disappear, and we become brothers. In this war, we are tempered as warriors and grow from simple comrades into one big family. For many of them, Ukraine becomes a second home.
And now a question. What language do you use to communicate on a daily basis and on the battlefield when giving orders? Russian propaganda often claims that Russian troops intercept transmissions allegedly in English or Polish and conclude that there are only Poles on the front line. How does communication work in your unit?
Не вірте перше російському і ПСО.
Don't believe Russian information and psychological operations. The main language on the battlefield is English. Of course, there are people who don't know English very well, but that's what commanders and interpreters are there for: Spanish, French, and other languages. There is another way. Colleagues help those who do not know English. For example, Poles who have been fighting with us for a long time explain everything to newcomers who do not know the language.
Тих же поляків, хто приїжджає без англійської мови, у нас воюють польські добровольці.
Everyone learns English during their service. It is a basic requirement without which the unit cannot function normally. That is why all foreigners learn this language during their service.
Нормально функціонувати, тому всі іноземці вивчають англійську мову в процесі служби у нас.
We provide all the necessary conditions for this: tutors, teachers, translators. After just 6 months, a person who previously did not know English begins to speak it. What's more, after 6 months, they can also understand Ukrainian.
Не тільки англійську називати, а й розуміти українську.
Please tell me, how many different nationalities are represented in your legion? What is the geography of their origin?
I recently spoke with my commander, and we came to the conclusion that we probably don't have anyone from Antarctica. There is also no one from North Korea. We do not accept citizens of the Russian Federation either.
That's understandable. One more question. We started with recruitment. What about the formalities related to demobilization, returning to civilian life? For Ukrainian citizens, there are specific documents and rules. What about foreign volunteers? After all, you can't just leave your place of service at any time.
Foreign soldiers have the same privileges, rules of service, and security as Ukrainians. Neither better nor worse. We are all equal. Those foreign volunteers who have completed their required service and are mentally exhausted, who want to return home to their families, can terminate their contract at any time if they wish. However, usually even those who have done so call after a month and say, "I want to come back. I'm tired of sitting at home. I want to defend Ukraine again, because Ukraine is defending not only itself, but the whole world. I don't want the same thing to happen at home."
What you said is a good introduction to the next question, which I have already touched on. Why do people from different, often very distant countries come to fight for Ukraine? You mentioned that they are motivated. What is that motivation? You mentioned that we should not succumb to Russian information and psychological operations. But very often propaganda suggests that money is the main motivation. You have already said that for these people, the motivation is to fight against the Russian Federation. You talk to these volunteers. What do they tell you?
Let me say right away, you can't make money in war that would compensate for the risk. People are dying and getting wounded in this war. That is why we reject financial motivation as a fabrication of Russian propaganda and an element of information and psychological warfare. People come for various reasons. Some see what is happening to the civilian population in Ukraine, and their sense of justice is awakened. Volunteers from Eastern and Central Europe understand that Ukraine is also defending them. If Ukraine does not stop the enemy and they do not join the resistance, they will be next. Another motivation characterizes the professional soldiers mentioned by Mr. Arter, who want to gain real combat experience so that they can defend their countries. They want to be ready if, God forbid, a similar situation occurs in their countries. In general, the motivation is shared. When I ask, "What is your motivation?" they reply, "I want to protect the free world so that what is happening to Ukraine never happens again. And that is why they are fighting on the side of Ukraine."
Не повторилося нічого такого, що з Україною. І вони воюють на боці з України.
Ви також трошки це згадали раніше, цей своє ставлення.
You also mentioned their attitude towards Ukraine. Please tell us more. What does Ukraine mean to them?
Як вони дивляться на Україну? Що вона для них позначає? Я, може, скажу таку історію.
Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, a Colombian band that sings in Ukrainian performed in Uzhhorod.
Тут був концерт колумбійського гурту.
Colombian soldiers were also present at the concert, and it was very interesting to see how they experienced the songs both in Spanish and Ukrainian.
Як вони переживали не тільки ці пісні, які співали колумбійці іспанською мовою, але як вони переживали також українською мовою, то що було співане.
This is a Colombian group that supported our boys. The Colombians sang in Ukrainian, recited Shevchenko, Sosura, patriotic Ukrainian poems.
І патріотичне українське верше. Що це позначає, цей Україна для тих людей? І чи може
What does Ukraine mean to these people? Do you see examples of current legionnaires planning to tie their future to Ukraine, wanting to stay here?
Думають про своє майбутнє в Україні, що вони тут залишаться.
90% of those currently fighting in the International Legion plan to continue their lives in Ukraine. They can no longer imagine life without this country. They say this sincerely, with their hands on their hearts. Some foreigners marry Ukrainian women and start families. Ukraine gives them emotions, hope, and love. They want to stay here to defeat their common enemy, to ensure that Ukraine remains free, and to build a future here. For many of them, Ukraine has become a second home. They openly say that they like Lviv, Kharkiv, and other cities. Ukraine is a very beautiful country, and I emphasize that this is said by foreigners from all over the world, not Ukrainians. These are people from abroad who have something to compare it to.
І це говорять іноземці всього світу. Це не говорять українці. Це от іноземці всього світу, які мають чим порівняти.
Mr. Yuriy, I am not a soldier in your legion, but I am also a foreigner myself, and to be honest, I can confirm what you have said. It is not without reason that I have been living in Ukraine for so long, Mr. Yuriy. The attitude of these soldiers towards Ukraine is one thing, but the attitude of Ukrainians towards soldiers who are not Ukrainians is another. How do Ukrainians perceive soldiers who have come from countries as far away as Colombia? What about Poles? I understand that there are also many of them in your units.
Our legion includes Poles, Colombians, and representatives of other countries. Ukrainians can only have a positive attitude towards foreign volunteers. After all, no one forced them to come here. Neither you nor I called them. They came voluntarily to defend a country that is essentially foreign to them. This can only have a positive effect on Ukrainians, who are simply delighted that people from other corners of the world are coming to Ukraine to defend it. Even on the streets, for example, people come up to foreigners in uniform and want to buy them something or give them a hug. The atmosphere is really friendly.
Пане Юрію, я думаю, ви вже пару разів відповіли на це питання, але я мушу його задати ще раз, щоб наші глядачі, наші слухачі...
Yuriy, I think you've answered this question several times already, but I have to ask it again so that our viewers and listeners can hear this message clearly. In Russian propaganda, foreign volunteers are often referred to as mercenaries. You have already mentioned that people who want to earn money, for example in private military companies or by participating in military operations in other parts of the world, can earn much more in much more comfortable conditions. But could you confirm once again whether the use of the word mercenary in relation to volunteers serving in your units is justified at all.
Слово «найманець» в відношенні до добровольців, які є військовими ваших підрозділів.
Повторюю ще раз, це російський
I will
агресор.
repeat once again. This is all Russian propaganda and information psychological operations. Never believe Russian propaganda and its information psychological operations, because 100% of what the Kremlin says is simply nonsense and rubbish. No mercenaries come to us. First, we do not have private military companies. Secondly, all foreigners who come to us are volunteers, full-fledged soldiers in every sense of the word. They sign a contract with the armed forces of Ukraine, wear uniforms, and are subject to the statutes of the armed forces of Ukraine.
Це добровольці.
І відразу таке питання під час ведення...
Another question right away. It seems to me, please correct me if I am wrong, that soldiers of the International Legion are exposed to particular danger if they are taken prisoner for any Ukrainian soldier or civilian. Russian captivity poses a huge threat to life and health, which we have seen regularly during this war.
Дуже велика загроза життю і здоров'ю. Ми це бачимо регулярно під час...
How does it look in the case of foreigners? Is captivity more dangerous for them than for Ukrainian citizens? Or, in your opinion, is the threat the same?
Чи на тому самому рівні, на вашу думку?
Russia does not comply with international humanitarian law. It does not comply with the Geneva Conventions. For example, when we take prisoners, we comply with all the Geneva Conventions. Our prisoners are well fed and well treated. As for foreigners, if they are taken prisoner by Russia, they are treated the same as Ukrainians because they defend Ukraine just like Ukrainians. The Russians do not comply with international humanitarian law in their treatment of prisoners, either with regard to Ukrainians or with regard to foreign volunteers in the armed forces of Ukraine. But, Mr. Artur, no one can feel completely safe, neither I, as deputy commander, nor even the commander. This is war. Either you accept it and move on, or you are constantly afraid. Then it is not worth going to war. In war, people die and are taken prisoner. But God is with us.
God and truth. You mentioned Russian propaganda and information psychological operations that exploit topics related to the International Legion and beyond. Is the International Legion fighting alone? Or are other structures of the Ukrainian state dealing with this disinformation, for example on social media or in the information space in general, and trying to refute it? How?
Звичайно.
Of course, it is not only specialized units that are fighting Russian propaganda. You, as journalists, by reporting on our interview, are sending an important message to the public. Do not believe Russian information and psychological operations. Ukrainian soldiers do not have horns. They defend a free society. They do not eat people. The Russian population is so indoctrinated that they once believed that we ate children in Ukraine. You know this very well. Thanks to journalists like you who report on this. People are learning about the real situation. Abroad, they are realizing that Russia is lying. It lies openly. And the effectiveness of Russian information and psychological operations is gradually declining.
Influencing the Russian information space is practically pointless. Currently, there is no way to convey the truth to Russian citizens. This is not only because the Russian state creates blockades, but also because Russian society does not want to accept such information. Our main task is to convey this message to the West, primarily to Poland, to all of Europe, as well as to other allies of Ukraine.
України. А скажіть, будь ласка, ще таке питання з моєї сторони.
Do you have any examples of Russian propaganda using the topic of the International Legion? have there been any recent cases of negative portrayals of the existence of the International Legion and foreign volunteers?
В негативному сенсі існування Міжнародного легіону закордонних добровольців.
Just go online and search Google. There is a lot of such information. They keep repeating it. As you mentioned, first and foremost, mercenaries come here to fight for money. Let me emphasize once again, this is propaganda and an information psychological operation. Volunteers are coming to us. The topic of mercenaries worries them greatly because their society believes that mercenaries are really coming here to kill Russian civilians. I refute this immediately. It is just an information and psychological operation. Only foreign volunteers are fighting on the Ukrainian side.
Exactly. They often judge others based on themselves, because currently the regular army of the Russian Federation consists of mercenaries, who, in most cases, judging by numerous interviews, say themselves that they went to war for money.
And thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, there are fewer and fewer of them every day.
I agree. Thank you to the armed forces of Ukraine. Thank you for everything. If it weren't for the Ukrainian army, we would never have been able to conduct this interview.
Not just this interview. It's hard to imagine how we could live here at all. Mr. Yuriy, I would like to know your opinion. What will happen next? I think we all believe in victory. But earlier you mentioned why, for example, Poles are coming here. Do you think there is a danger that if we do not stop, God forbid, the Russian Federation on the territory of Ukraine that it has occupied, it will go further? Does this mean that for people like me, for my relatives, my friends, sooner or later the war will reach Poland, and maybe even further?
I'm not going to scare anyone. I'll say it straight. Ukraine has long since become a wall, which, as you pointed out, primarily protects Europe and the whole world. Of course, if Ukraine does not stop the enemy, the Baltic states, Poland, and all of Eastern Europe will be next. And then the appetite of the Red Terror will certainly not stop at Europe. But that will not happen. Ukraine will prevail.
Але до цього не дійде. Україна переможе.
We are very grateful for everything you are doing for Ukraine's victory. I myself am grateful to the armed forces of Ukraine for allowing me to live and work here in Ukraine. Mr. Yuriy, we have already talked a lot about the language you use on a daily basis. We know that there are also Poles among the soldiers of your legion. Have you picked up anything from their language? Have you learned any Polish words from your colleagues from Poland who are fighting in the legion? Perhaps you know some Polish words if it is not a secret and you can say them on air.
До секрет. Bardzo dziękuję. До widzenia. Polska narwana. Яке вам ще слово навести? Не wiem. Мовить по-польськи, мислить по-польськи. Оце з цих слів, що...
These are some of the expressions my Polish colleagues taught me.
А інші польські слова...
Unfortunately, I can't give you any other Polish words because they are a bit harsh.
We can imagine that you often hear them there. We visit different places and understand that sometimes something like that can slip out.
These words characterize Russians very well. That's all. I think everyone understands what words I mean.
Mr. Yuriy, we are very grateful for your time and the opportunity to talk, as well as for what you and your subordinates are doing. Thank you very much. Finally, not necessarily in Polish, would you like to say something to our Polish viewers? For example, a few words about your battalion or the situation in Ukraine in general. You have a moment to address the Polish people.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am addressing you as a representative of the armed forces of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, and the First International Legion. We are grateful to you for your help. You are true allies. Your help and support are an invaluable contribution to the ongoing war and bring us closer to its end. It is not just about ending the war and destroying the enemy, the Red Terror of the Russian Federation, but above all, it is about Ukraine's victory, so that a free society can exist. Thank you.
This was Yuriy Komarnitsky, Deputy Commander of the First International Legion of Defense of Ukraine. Thank you very much for this interview, for your time, and for your service.
Дякую вам. Слава Україні.
Героям слава. І слава, хвала Polsce.
Слава Польщі.